What is up, guys? Beatowski Williams, aka TheSwolefessor, here to educate you on health and social well-being. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about minimalist training. So, just to be clear, when I'm talking about minimalist training, I'm not referring to the idea of going in and doing the most minimum amount of volume that you can to stimulate growth and doing no more than that. Basically, that type of thinking has nothing to do with how many movements you're doing. It's just going in and doing the minimum amount of volume that you can to stimulate growth, progressively overloading with that, and then making progress, because obviously that works. If it's, even though it's the minimum amount, if it's enough volume to stimulate growth, then you're good to go. That's not what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about minimalist training, I'm referring to the idea that you basically just pick, one major compound movement for each muscle group. You only progress on those, and that with those, you're going to be able to maximize growth and hypertrophy in your entire body, like in every muscle group, in every area. Like, is this true? Does it work? If so, who should do it? Who shouldn't do it? And if it's not optimal, if it's suboptimal, are there any circumstances in which it should be used? Because there's this huge, split where on one end you have people who are kind of like, no, it's complete garbage. It's just people who are lazy and don't want to put in the time and the work. It's stupid. You can't make gains that way. And then you have people on the other end who is like, you can completely make gains this way. In fact, it's probably the better way to go about training, because you're less likely to have overuse injuries. You're less likely to burn out, things like that, hit a plateau, etc. So what I want to say, guys, is as usual, well, not always as usual. Sometimes some things are pretty set in stone. Some things are more, there's variations. You guys already know that from watching my videos on this channel. But in this case, guys, it's very much going to depend. Now, let's get into it as far as the details. Personally, no, I don't just by default recommend minimalist training, meaning, let me give you guys an example. So you go in and the only movements you'll ever do are bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press, then maybe one type of pull motion, whether it's like weighted chin-ups or barbell row, whichever one you choose, right? Using only those movements, and you maximize growth in your entire body. Like, no. Now, even though I've done videos over 5 movements that or 5 or 6 moves that I believe every beginner or every lifter should incorporate some variation of one of these movements. And even though I've talked about the importance of beginners just focusing on those big, heavy compound movements and then gradually adding in accessory work as needed, as you become more advanced, guys, we have to understand that there is something called diminished returns, which means no matter how much you're working, even if in your second year you're working technically twice as hard as you did in your first year, meaning you're maybe lifting twice as much weight, you're not going to put on as much muscle mass as you did in your first year, assuming that you train correctly in your first year as far as consistency, progressive overload, etc. Just because that's how diminished returns works. Our bodies adapt to the stimulus more and more. Yes, we progressively overload to try to break through that. But regardless, like I said, that's why people will see all these drastic changes in their first year or 2 years, but then as the years goes by, each year it's harder, like you look a little less different each year, and it's all about working towards progressing with those very small gradual changes the longer that you live. So the mindset is that you can maximize your hypertrophy though with just those movements alone. Now, the problem with this thinking, and the reason why I don't just enforce yeah, go for it, that's fine, is to understand that there's certain areas that those movements aren't gonna hit as effectively as something else could. Like the deadlift, for example. Don't get me wrong, the deadlift is a great movement. Hits like 70-80% of the muscle in the body, works your entire posterior chain, and yes, it does engage the lats. A lot of people don't believe that. I don't know why I don't believe it. It's just a simple fact. You can look at the studies on it, engage the lats. But no, I don't by any means believe that the deadlift is as good a lat builder as, say, like some type of vertical pull, like a weighted chin-up or weighted pull-up or anything like that. So with that being said, do I believe that if somebody only sticks to those lifts, that they can maximize growth in every area? No, they probably won't maximize growth. I think they'll get pretty good, decent growth in a lot of areas. Like if you get really strong in your bench press, yes, I think you're gonna have decent chest, front delts, triceps. If you get really strong on squats, I think you're gonna have pretty decent leg development, etc. But a lot of that is genetic, guys. I mean, there may be some people out there where they can just bench press and that's all they'll have to do. But other people, they need to incorporate weighted dips, incline dumbbell press. And even if we look at something like the squats, which is supposed to be the king of leg exercises, right? There are certain muscle groups in your legs and in your lower body that the squat doesn't hit as effectively as other movements do, like say, for example, like the deadlift or the lunge. Like for example, if somebody only did squats, I don't think they would maximize hypertrophy in their hamstrings. I don't. I think if you want to maximize hypertrophy in your hamstrings, you need to be incorporating some type of deadlift, some type of Romanian deadlift, leg curls, etc. I really do. And it's just because of how well it activates and hits the muscle. Now, as I've explained before, an exercise doesn't have to hit a muscle perfectly or provide as much stimulus as possible in that muscle to stimulate growth. Meaning if we have 2 movements, one stimulates the muscle at 80% and one does it at say 60%, the one that stimulates at 60% can still lead you to as much growth as the one that stimulates it by 80%, but it's gonna take longer. It's not gonna be as effective or efficient as the movement that hits the muscle group better, which just makes sense, right? If this movement is better for this muscle group, then it's probably gonna stimulate growth at a better and faster, more effective rate than the one that's suboptimal for it. However, if we're talking about like just maximizing, like getting the most you can of growth in the muscle, we got to think about some of the things that are kind of going to be limited and not get hit correctly if we use minimalist training. For one, like your calves. Unless you just have amazing calf genetics, yes, you have to isolate your calves to get them to grow. Even something like, you know, like the lateral head and rear head of your delts. Even though, yes, it does get worked when you do overhead press, and yes, our rear does get worked when we do something like rows or pulls, they don't get as much stimulation is when we hit them directly. So you're probably not going to see the same type of development in it that you would if you were to incorporate things like lateral raises, rear delt flies. Now, mind you, you can only stimulate so much growth in a muscle. So if somebody's just doing so much rowing work, so much pulling work to where they're, you know, stimulating that rear delt as much as possible, then maybe coming in and throwing something like rear delt flies and face pulls wouldn't necessarily be necessary. But with minimalist training, you're not going to do that. You're not going to come in and do just excessive sets on that movement, because it's minimalist training kind of goes against the whole point of doing that, right? So we have to just think about that. Think about certain muscle groups that just don't seem to develop as well, whether it's due to genetics or just because the movement isn't that effective at hitting it, if we only stick to just the basic compound movements like bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press, and even weighted chin-ups. Not to say that these aren't. Now, once again, if you had to choose only doing just one or a few movements, and that makes sense. Those are great because those are probably gonna give you the most bang for your buck. The squat's probably gonna give you more bang for your buck for overall leg development than say a leg press. So it makes sense. But if you don't have to limit yourself, why do that? Once again, so long we're trying to not exceed our max recoverable volume. Once again, I'm not telling you guys that, oh, minimalist training is garbage, you have to do crazy high volume all the time. Not at all, because that has its fair share of problems as well. Not that high volume doesn't work, and not that in the same way that minimalist training, it's not that minimalist training doesn't work, but there's disadvantages to it. There's certain things to, like I said, when you do excessively high volume, we know, like I'm talking like volume that you can't recover for, they're not gonna make gains, period. But the problem, one of the problems with high volume of itself, even if it's something you can recover from, is that you can sometimes deal with overuse injuries. Or if you're doing a whole bunch of high volume, then you may get bored of certain movements. So you keep incorporating more and more movements. Maybe you're throwing in more isolation work for your tricep than what you should be. Instead of just focusing on like overhead extensions to work on the long game, maybe doing a whole bunch of different variations of press downs, even though that's already getting stimulated when you're doing a bunch of your horizontal and vertical pressing motions. So maybe that starts to give you like elbow issues, things that I've done videos on before. So it's not to say that one extreme is better than another. And that's why I express you guys trying to find like that happy spot. You know, you don't want to be like necessarily right next to your minimum recoverable, but you don't want to exceed your max recoverable volume either. But once again, focusing on just the whole idea of like, just, hey, just do this movements and you'll fully stimulate all growth in it. No, not necessarily. I think that, for example, someone who only bench presses isn't going to see as good of shoulder development as someone who bench presses and overhead presses. Like, that's just the fact of the matter. Like, they may get a lot of good development in the front, but they're not going to get as much development in the long head of their tricep or the lateral delt as someone who's bench pressing and overhead pressing. So that's the thing that you have to keep in mind in terms of like, does minimalist training work? Well, it kind of just depends on your goals. People say you can't. Now, the people who say you can't build a decent physique with minimalist training, I think that's bull. I think you can. You're maybe not gonna have a bodybuilder physique. You may not have the best possible physique that you could have. But as far as a decent physique, well, for one, that's kind of subjective and relative to you of what you consider a decent physique. If you just want to look like, hey, I just want to look athletic, look built, I want people to be like, oh yeah, he lifts, or oh, he plays some sport, then yeah, just focusing on those big compound movements only, yeah, that you definitely can build a physique like that. But as far as like just maximizing it the way that some of you may want to, or the way that a bodybuilder may want to, or someone who just really cares about aesthetics, no, probably not. Now, as for, okay, if that's the case, who should do it? People where you're not really trying to prioritize weightlifting to such a huge degree, where like for example, that's another thing. Another problem with minimalist training is that you're not gonna get as strong with minimalist training. Because if you're coming in only like once and twice a week and only hitting those big movements, you're not gonna get as strong as someone who's coming in 3 or 4 times a week and hitting those movements because of frequency, right? They have higher frequency, they're gonna get stronger on those movements faster. So for someone who's like a powerlifter or a strength athlete, then no, because you have to keep in mind that strength is a skill. It is something you have to practice in terms of weightlifting. Now, building muscle is simply a physiological response to weight training. It has nothing to do with your skill. It's more like to do with your genetics and the stimulus you're providing. So with that mindset, I understand why people think, well, so long as I'm progressively overloading and providing enough stimulus, the muscles will grow, right? Yes, they will. But once again, it's all about the rate of growth you're looking for, how effective you want it to grow, and how much you want a muscle to grow compared to how much it could grow if you threw in extra work. But with that being said, if you're someone where, let's say you just want to lift just for the sake of health, you're just trying to lift to be healthy, be a little bit stronger, and you're on a time crunch. Maybe you are one of these people, and I think it's a horrible excuse when people are like, I just don't have time to lift. Maybe you are someone where you literally just have 45 minutes or an hour to lift once, twice a week, and you just want to lift to get the health benefits of being stronger, all the, you know, the physiological benefits that come with it, cutting back on diseases, the mental aspects of everything that comes with it, then I think minimalist training could very well be for you. It definitely wouldn't be for someone like me where, you know, I'm passionate about it, I'm very involved in it, it's a huge part of what I do as far as powerlifting, this channel, personal training, everything like that. But if you're someone where it's like, I just need to do the bare minimum so that I can like build a decent physique, then yeah, I definitely think that it can work. Like if you guys someone I brought up to you guys on the channel before, the aesthetic professional, I wouldn't say his training is exactly minimalist, but it's kind of similar to what that would look like. It's about people who are just trying to get in and out the gym, build a nice physique, but they don't have a whole lot of time because maybe they have a busy schedule. They work 8 to 5, they have to do a bunch of stuff before and after work. So you guys check his channel out. I'll go ahead and leave it in the description down below, and that's kind of a good example of where I think something like that could work. And the dude has a very good physique. I don't think anybody would say his physique is trash or average by any means, like unless you're doing based off these crazy insane internet standards and these roided up bodybuilding standards. But yeah, I think minimalist training has its place. That's why people came up with it. I'm opposed to thinking that minimalist training is just for lazy people. For some people where they're not about so much the lifestyle of training, lifting, they just do it as an accessory to their health, I think it can be good. But if you're someone who really you're trying to, like, you know, maximize your muscle growth, your strength, your hypertrophy, you're trying to maximize all that as effectively as you can and as little time as you can, then no, minimalist training probably isn't gonna be for you. But that's pretty much the whole idea behind this. Like I said, you just bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press, do one type of back movement, and you'll be good to go, maximizing hypertrophy in all those areas. Like, don't get me wrong, a good majority of you will be covered. If you get strong in all those movements, because of all the muscle groups that are covered in those compounds collectively together, yes, you will have a decent solid physique, but no, I don't necessarily believe that you're gonna maximize hypertrophy in every given muscle group if that's all you stick to it. Unless you're someone who's just like a genetic elite, then maybe you can. But for the majority of people, that's not gonna be the case. So that's my thoughts on it, guys. That's pretty much the idea behind minimalist training. That's what I think as far as who should do it. Once again, just to reiterate, if you're someone where you're just trying to get out the gym, lift this as an accessory to your life for health, just get a little bit stronger gradually. You're not trying to train for powerlifting or some sport. You don't care about getting as strong as fast as you can or maximizing muscle growth in every area as fast as you can. You just want a nice, decent, balanced, healthy physique, then yes, I think it's good for you. But if that's not you and you want anything more than that, then minimalist training is definitely not going to be for you. So that's it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you did. If you did not, leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can do to get better. Like the video, share, subscribe. Keep it simple, specific, scientific. I'll catch y'all later.